You know what's the key?
Hello, everybody. Just 1 second, please. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, imagine a scenario where you had the power to predict the future of F&B. Imagine if you could actually turn data into financial returns. What I'm talking about is, imagine if you would actually be able to decipher exactly which components drive people, drive sentiment, drive revenues within F&B. Many of you may concur. The clicker is not working. It's working here, but not here. Sorry, guys. Thank you. Many of you may concur that data analytics is revolutionizing strategic decision-making across every industry. However, we strongly believe that actionable F&B data is still in its infancy. I'm Gustavo De Hostos from Forsite Creative. We're a company that comes from the concept, strategy, design, and implementation side of food and beverage. And we felt that this shortcoming was actually not allowing us to unlock maximum potential. And for that reason, we've launched Forsite Data. And today I'll be sharing some of our secrets of how we address data for F&B. The first thing we've done, as you can see on the screen, is try to identify in one of the key cities of India how many restaurants actually have rich data online, rich presence, rich commentary online, so that we can actually start understanding on a more macro level what the scene looks like. You can see a little bit of a segregation of price level here, indicating, of course, that the luxury and the upper segment are still quite rare and still in their infancy in this market. One of the interesting tools would be to understand what are people talking about. We use AI analytics to run through all of the commentary of these 11,000+ restaurants and try to understand what are the cuisines and topics that people are actually referring to, whether it's this cuisine specifically or dishes or things associated to a specific cuisine. We were surprised to see that in the last 12 months, hot topics seem to be Asian, in this case Pan-Asian cuisine, as well as Italian. Now, this is extremely broad, not very helpful. The interesting thing about bespoke data analysis, of course, is to take a case study. In this case, because of the wide audience, I've decided to keep it a little bit broad, but you could go really into your comp set, specific type of cuisines, your existing outlets, and so on. We've taken 84 restaurants in Mumbai, spread across 5-star hotels or standalone restaurants that were prominent, and that led us to 21,000 people that we identified as the target audience, people who were leaving rich commentary and also have a digital footprint that goes across to many other restaurants to understand certain correlations and certain patterns. They left 80,000 restaurant reviews across all of India, and they visited another 142,000 restaurants internationally. What can we do with this? Well, a pretty basic start is to understand what are correlations of specific topics to overall sentiment. This audience, being quite broad, didn't show too many trends or very strong linear correlations. However, we were quite surprised to see that decor is one that is already increasing in popularity amongst this, price being quite strong. Staff friendliness and beverage quality were the other ones that showed a correlation. But we feel still not concrete enough. So can we go a little bit deeper? This is an interesting diagnostic tool that we use. We call it our SWAT analysis. How does it work? On the horizontal axis, we put the frequency of mention of a specific topic, which AI would identify as a topic that has been discussed. And on the vertical, we actually put the sentiment associated to the topic, from very positive to very negative. Basically, we then split everything into 4 quadrants, top right being the strengths of the market of India for that audience, bottom right, of course, the weaknesses, top left, opportunities, bottom left, the threats. What we see is that the current market for that audience of 21,000 people already shows that staff friendliness, atmosphere, food quality, these are very important, and also the market is catering to those quite well. We've noticed it as well, I believe, all of us in the hospitality in the last couple of days. What is actually very interesting, specifically in markets that are developing and countries that are growing at the rate that India is to look at the opportunities, presentation around food and beverage, outdoor areas, views, location, entertainment, design, lighting. We were so surprised. Even in markets like the UAE, where we actually do many of these data researches, design and lighting weren't coming up as such opportunities. Now, what can we learn from these 142 other places that they visited internationally? Well, we're going to go more into a country that's going to be attracting international brands, attracting international talent, attracting international trends. So this typically gives us a bit of a foresight of where things may be going, where they may be heading. We've noticed, of course, that USA, UK, UAE, and Thailand are the top places that these visit, specifically for food and beverage. We know, of course, many families have established there, many people have education there, but also some of these are tourist destinations that are quite accessible. But let's go a bit further. What if we would identify and shortlist the specific brands, restaurant brands that are most visited? This is an easy one for hotel groups that are looking to take a franchise. Easy one for groups that are looking to maybe sign a master franchise agreement. Interestingly, similar to the initial data analytics, you see restaurants in the Pan-Asian sector, but we also identified a lot around beach clubs. We've done the same thing for hotel brands. That can also be quite interesting. On the hotel brands, we see, of course, family-friendly, or brands that are familiar, the Taj Group, or those that offer perhaps a casino. Sometimes we get asked, I want to attract that one class that goes to London. Where do they visit in London? Basically, the data nowadays gives you the possibility to check any market, any location. And this, of course, is from 20,000+ people. What if we could dissect and understand the real high spenders, where do they go to? And then you start getting the brands, the Rocas, the Zumas of this world. Now, to go even a little bit deeper, we like to follow these digital footprints and understand what are their spending patterns. What are the patterns that show that these typically go to more expensive restaurants versus less expensive restaurants? And a question we often get asked in many markets is, should I attract the locals, the residents, or the tourists, the visitors? Considering the big domestic tourism of India, we decided to include as visitors also domestic tourism. And what we see here is that for the market of Mumbai specifically, the higher spenders tend to be significantly higher from visitors rather than residents. The opposite of what we find in markets such as Dubai, for example. What if we would say, based on spending patterns, how do cuisine preferences shift? Again, we can choose who and how we'd like to tackle this, but on a high level, we see higher spenders, for example, very dissatisfied with international cuisine, Indian cuisine. But as you start moving into middle spenders or the lower spenders, we see how those two instantly start moving up and become a strength. Depending on the sector you want to attract, depending on the hotel positioning you're looking for, you can actually decide on cuisines based on data, based on what people are looking for, based on what the market actually shows would drive them. Some of you operate in many different cities, and sometimes it's important to also understand, how do I adapt my brand? How are demographics going to shift? What do I need to keep in mind? So we've added then New Delhi, took another 84 restaurants, 20,000 profiles, 80,000 other reviews in India, and then see what does that lead to. Well, first of all, the sector that we've analyzed, to make it a little bit more comprised, are the ones that go to the high-end restaurants. We see that it's predominantly male-driven, males in their 30s to 39s. We see the other cities they come from, New Delhi, etc., the countries that they visit the most. Compare Mumbai to New Delhi, still predominantly male, a little bit older, we notice, different destinations of origin, and also countries such as Canada pop up. What can I do with this information? Well, using AI textual analysis, we run some statistical analysis to try to understand an independent topic per se, whether it's a hard element or a soft element, a low-hanging fruit or something that requires more investment. How likely are they, based on vast volumes of data, to really impact satisfaction and drive customers into that specific space? And what we've noticed, actually, in this case between males and females, is that staff friendliness for that audience, both New Delhi and Mumbai, seems to be the absolute most important thing that will probably save a dining experience and drive people in. We've got under the 50+ topics that we actually try to collect, also staff training, staff efficiency, staff serving timings, but none of those really showed a strong correlation. Staff friendliness is the most important thing. For that audience, we basically need to invest in our people, in their characters, in their charismas, in their well-being. This is the lowest hanging fruit for that market. What's also interesting is price and food quality rated pretty high. Compared to other markets, these are actually pretty strong correlations and pretty strong statistical reasons to look into these. Interestingly enough, females pretty much feel that all of these are more important than males in the market. Now, let's say we go even a little bit deeper. Can we start understanding, based on behavior, local foodies, international foodies, based on group types, double income, no kids, families, and also based on preferences, Asian food lovers, Italian food lovers, beer lovers, how does this data maybe differ from one to the other? And I think this is where it gets interesting. This is what we should all do, either at a hotel level for an overall F&B destination with multiple offerings, or at one concept. Who are we trying to attract and what matters to them, so we know where to allocate investments? This answers the questions that were being discussed before in the panel. I believe design is more important, somebody said. Is the overall? Well, actually, there are statistical ways to understand which are more important, and it changes from persona to persona, from market to market, concept to concept. Let's have a look. Asian food lovers. Across those two cities, they're actually less keen on design, much more on food quality, and significantly less price sensitive if you get the first two right. We can probably relate to that. Beer lovers, much more keen on atmosphere, less on food quality, but much more on food variety, good prices, and staff friendliness. The social media enthusiasts, which is a nice way of saying the Instagrammers, they don't care about atmosphere. They care tremendously more about drinks quality and about decor. We thought that was quite interesting, actually. So who am I trying to attract? And based on that, where do I allocate my investments? This is the kind of things that can come out of doing these data analysis. Here we have another one. I understand, of course, over here, big groups, big families is a big thing, but you also have the double income, no kids, both locals and internationals or visitors. How do things differ from one to the other? Well, actually, the dinkies, they seem to be much less about entertainment, but more about atmosphere. Smaller menus, but more food quality. And they are more interested in general in staff and price. Again, based on my configuration, my tables, who I'm trying to attract, how do I adapt? Back to the question of the internationals versus the locals. Here we can see again the difference between them on the 4 key topics. So international foodies, much more keen on atmosphere, a little bit less on food quality, and much less on menu variety than the local market. It also gets interesting, actually, to contrapose these data into geographical maps. And there's multiple applications to this. You're looking for a new location, you're looking to validate a location. We can study where people go, and then map this over with actually a supply and demand to identify direct gaps based on pure data. Here we do a very simple one. We defer or compare international foodies to local foodies. And what we can see, of course, is that the local foodies, specifically Mumbai, are much more spread out, whilst the international ones are more in the south, in the west, which of course is where more of the tourist attractions and the hotels are. So to recap, what should I use data for? What are the possibilities today? We strongly believe you should not determine cuisines and concepts anymore based on gut or personal preference. There's possibilities now to use data to identify these. Informing where the priorities should be. We always have these discussions. Should we have a direct access from outside? Should we lease it out? Should we invest in it? Our view is important. Which ones? Understanding who my customers are, where they move, what they've been exposed to. This is the easiest way to predict what their expectations and what their exposures are internationally. Addressing their actual preferences, similar to the previous done studies. For any kind of expansion, location, or market validations. And that can also lead to market translation of a specific concept, and ultimately to drive management and investment decisions. We hope this gives you a good taste of what data can do for strategic F&B investment decision making. If you have any questions, I'll open up the floor, and if you'd like to link up to us, please scan the QR. Yes. So, absolutely. The question is, where do we get the data from and what kind of algorithms we use to show these data points? So our technology allows us to pretty much go into any open platform, right? So we scrape, ethically harvest the data from anything that's open. We prefer, and this report has been done purely on Google, because Google offers a lot of data-rich content, both on the business profiles, their geotag locations, etc. But you're not limited to Google. Depending on markets to markets, we tend to see that other open platforms can offer more, or a combination of multiple platforms can actually be joined together to provide this. Google specifically, when it matters where people go abroad, where they move, etc., gives you much more access to past dated data that's also tagged in terms of timelines, which is extremely helpful. You can, but if you do it manually, it will take millions of days. That's basically what we automated. But absolutely, everybody can see this data. It's just about consolidating it, cleaning it, synthesizing it, analyzing it. Any other questions? I think my time is up, but any other questions? The sample size? Oh, sorry. We find that a good sample size, depending on the markets, of course, would be anything above 15,000. Specifically, when we go into, Asian restaurants in a specific city, we did about 40,000 people with a couple 100,000 restaurants visited abroad. But in other markets, we've also been able to find a lot more. So we've gone into the millions of data points in some cases. It depends from market to market. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hostos. Moving on to our next session, please join me in